I think everybody has that one food that they say they don't want. They try to resist it as much as possible, where they always end up eating it. For me, that's cheesecake, especially those cheesecake bites from Zaxby's. I would always tell myself, I'm not going to have it. I'm not going to have it. And then suddenly the craving hits. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting here and negotiating with myself, trying to find a valid reason as to why I actually should have the cheesecake bites and why it's not going to hurt me on my fat loss. Eventually, after being stuck at 206 for the longest time, a thought occurred to me. If I keep telling myself that I don't want to have this food, I keep telling myself that I want to say no, but I always end up saying yes. How much of a choice is it really? Am I letting this food control me more than I'm willing to admit? Are you letting food control you more than you're willing to admit? I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is actually keeping themselves around food that they struggle with. First thing is first, you go to the store, you don't pass the aisle where the problem food is on. You go through that aisle, you look at it, you find some reason to buy it. Somehow it ends up in your cart. You take it home, put it in the refrigerator. Then you tell yourself, you know what? I'm only going to eat it every once in a while. I'm going to eat it in moderation, right? But you keep it in the refrigerator. You walk past it 10 times like a shark. And then all of a sudden, you ate the whole thing. You didn't even eat it in moderation. And then you blame it on discipline. You say, man, I wish I had enough discipline to just not eat so much of it. I wish I could just eat it in moderation, knowing you have a problem with that specific type of food. Well, I like to think about discipline as something of a muscle. You know, you could go to the gym, you could train it very hard, but you also have to recover it. If you continuously train your discipline muscle without recovering it, aka spending time away from the foods that you actually like, then you're just going to be overtraining. And what happens when you overtrain? The muscle doesn't actually get stronger, it just breaks itself down. And that's what's happening to your discipline when you keep yourself around the cheesecake. When you know you have a problem with the cheesecake, you continuously expose yourself to it without having to break from it. And thus you never actually become stronger from it and more disciplined. And so the solution is to stop trying to prove to yourself how disciplined you are. You don't get extra points from making this whole fat loss thing harder. In fact, you need to make it even easier to not fail. Don't buy it from the grocery store. Don't keep it in your refrigerator. Don't leave it on your counter. Me personally, I don't buy the cheesecake. The only time I really have cheesecake is when I'm going on a trip with my wife or something like that. And I'll be damned if I sit in traffic for another 30 minutes just to go to Zaxby's to get the cheesecake bites. And so you have to put all these barriers in front of you so that you have more time to think about why it's actually a good idea to not eat the food that you struggle with. Because think about this. If I really want to have some cheesecake, what are all the things that I would have to do? First, I'll have to get up, get dressed, walk out the door, get in my car, go to the store, go down the aisle, find the cheesecake, get the cheesecake, buy the cheesecake, bring it back to the house, and then eat the cheesecake. And somewhere in between that time, I'm going to think, I'm doing all this work just to erase my progress, just to push myself back on my progress. Whereas if you had the cheesecake just sitting in your refrigerator or sitting on your counter, there's a lot less time to think in between the time that you actually eat it. And thus, instead of having this mental battle with the problem food right in front of you, you have time to think about it. You have time to say no and actually fix it. Because I know you're going to feel very, very stupid and very idiotic if you were to do all this work in order to just move backwards with your goals. But getting your food environment right is only half the battle. Because let's be honest, some foods are just so damn hard to stop eating once you start. It could be the cheesecake, the cookies, the chips. They taste amazing, but the common denominator between all of these delicious ass foods is that they often have little to no fiber or little to no protein. And so if the majority of your diet consists of these types of foods, you may be hitting your calories, but if the majority of your calories consist of these types of foods, low protein, low fiber, taste amazing, you're going to be spending a lot of your fat loss journey hungry as hell because these foods have a low satiation. And then you're going to end up overeating on these foods anyway because they're easy to eat and they don't keep you full. But one of the best things I did, and one of the best qualities of tracking calories and your macros, is not completely banning all these delicious ass foods out my diet. One of the best things I did was literally just having less of them for 20% my diet, and then having the rest of my diet be mostly high protein and more fiber in my diet. That's more meats, more fruits, more vegetables, and definitely more fiber. Now, here's a caveat with fiber. You don't want to add too much too quickly, especially if you aren't eating much fiber right now. I say a good starting point is start trying to get 20 and then work your way up to like 30, 38 at the most. Because if you try to eat too much fiber too soon, it can have the opposite effect and mess up your gut. Now, a good amount of fiber in regulation could do these things. It could help you stay satisfied for longer. It could also be good for your gut health and keep you regular, keep you going to the bathroom regularly. But make sure you add it in slowly so that you don't have any of the bad side effects. But this is a great tool for fat loss because it kind of does the same thing that a lot of these Ozempics and Wegovy and Retta claim to do, which is it blunts your appetite a bit. So imagine this, you have a cheesecake and that's all you have. Now imagine you had the cheesecake with a fiber one brownie. You're not gonna go and eat another cheesecake. Or now imagine you had a protein shake, a fiber one brownie before you went to the event with cheesecake in it. You're a lot less likely to go crazy on that cheesecake. Now here's a good story, a good example of this. At our workplace, we had a barbecue event, and I didn't want to be that guy who didn't go, that hermit type of guy who just wasn't social. I wanted to be social. I wanted to talk to coworkers, catch up. So here's what I did. Because I didn't want this barbecue event to be the reason why I veered off my path. So this is what I did. I had got 2 fiber one brownies. They're 70 calories and 7 grams of fiber. And then I took a diet cherry Pepsi with me to the event. And whilst everybody was having their food and enjoying themselves, I was enjoying myself too. I was socializing. And people were asking me, well, are you okay with not eating? Like, are you fine? I'm like, I'm cool. I already ate. Because I ate those 2 fiber one brownies. They absorbed in my stomach and I felt satisfied. On top of me having the diet Pepsi, I was good. And when I got home, I ate my meal prep. So there was nothing stopping me from hitting my goals, and I was still able to go on this social outing. And when people hear diet, they think you have to miss out on these events and hanging out with friends and things like that. When all you have to do is just utilize tools like fiber and protein before you go so that you don't go there famished and then just devour the problem foods that you struggle with. Me personally, I do this every time I'm going somewhere. When I know there's going to be food there, I don't just say no just because I want to avoid the foods. I mean, sometimes I do because sometimes I don't want to go out. I'm kind of an introverted person most of the time, but just use this as a tool when you know you want to go somewhere, you know you want to hang out, you know the problem food's going to be there. Don't go there starving. Don't go there famished. Eat a bit of protein, eat some fiber, go there, and exercise and discipline will be a lot easier. This is the part I don't think I understood until I started eating healthier and being locked in on my diet for a longer period of time. But sometimes it isn't what happens when you eat the food. It's what happens right after and how the food makes you feel right after. So here's a quick little story. I was with my wife and it was her birthday, and I hadn't been locked into my diet for a very long time. And I had already built up all these good habits and things like that. When I thought, you know what, it's my wife's birthday, I want to let loose a bit. I'm not really going to track too much. I'm just going to have fun, you know what I mean? But I am going to keep my activity high. So I went with a plan. We had chicken and waffles, cheesecake, and pizza. Now, my plan was to walk it off and have a bit of a digestion walk. I was gonna walk on the treadmill in the hotel for like an hour, maybe an hour and a half, just to get my guts right because I find that when I walk, I feel a lot better in my guts. So that's what I was planning on doing. And it's also good for you in general. So that's what I was planning on doing. But when we got back to the hotel, I fell asleep accidentally. And I found it very hard to get up. When I woke up, my throat was dry, my nostrils felt like they were closed, my ears felt clogged. I had a mean headache. And I just all around wasn't feeling good. I did not want to get up, but I forced myself to get up because it's just so habitual for me to get a good walk in after a big ass meal. And I just know that if I were to get on the treadmill and walk for a bit, I would feel better. Like my insides would feel better. I just felt all around inflamed at the point. So I got up, I got on the treadmill, and I eventually started walking. And I walked for a good like 3 miles, and I felt better. But somewhere along the line, when I was on the treadmill, I started to think to myself how bad I was feeling, how otherworldly and crazy this felt. And I came to the realization that, yeah, this is like a one-time thing for me or once in a blue moon thing for me now. And I still find a way to enjoy myself and my diet in that way, in little small ways, like at my 20%. But how I ate on that night was a lot closer to how I ate on a regular basis at one point. And then I got to thinking, okay, if I ate like that on a regular basis, I was always tired, always didn't feel like doing anything, always felt mildly sick. And so when it came time to make a decision whether or not I wanted to actually do some meal prep or actually make a good decision for my health, I wouldn't do it because of the brain fog, because of the sick feeling. I would choose a convenient option. And then choosing the convenient option would make me feel the same way again. And then it just creates a crazy cycle that keeps you sick, out of shape, and fat. And this was the cycle that I was stuck in. This is a cycle that a lot of people are stuck in. And so sometimes it's not eating the act of eating the food. Sometimes it's the act of overeating and reaping the consequences of that afterwards that kind of keep you in that cycle. And that's why it's very important to actually control the food that you eat. Because a person that can control the food they eat, they can control pretty much every aspect of their life. Because from that story, you can tell that if you eat like that on a regular basis, your mentality is totally different. It's hard for you to build habits. In the way you're kind of mentally castrated. And so that's why I really want to harp on the importance of building these good habits because sure, I was sluggish. I didn't feel good. It took some willpower to get up, but it didn't take much because it was really me having a habitual thought. It's habitual for me to do the right thing. So I just did it. And so if you could go ahead and build these habits up, you can learn how to create an environment where you're not overeating the food that you struggle with. You can learn how to eat to be satisfied and be full and not overeat on the bad foods. If you could build these habits will be strong enough to catch you in those times where willpower cannot save you. And so that's why building these habits are very important for actually breaking these cycles, because eating cheesecake never again is unrealistic. You want to be able to eat the cheesecake and then do the right thing right afterwards. Because the goal isn't to never eat foods that you like ever again. The goal is to be able to eat foods that you like again, but not let it decide what happens next. Not let it decide that you're going to do another bad thing and trigger down to more bad things.